Our guest tonight is WWE Hall of Famer Mick Foley. How you doing?
Hey, I'm doing great. I'm on speaker momentarily while I strap this ice pack to my knee, and but go ahead and start firing away with questions.
No problem. Listen, take care of yourself first and foremost. Well, you recently released your new book, Saint Mick: My Journey from Hardcore Legend to Santa's Jolly Elf. Why did you feel now was the right time to write this book, and what are you hoping to accomplish with its release?
Yeah, well, you guys are officially the first interview I'm doing as of this talk. It's not. Its release date's not there yet. It's October 17th. And I don't know what I was thinking because it's not like it's a book that lends itself to, like it's not like my people who like me as a wrestler have been chomping at the bit for my Santa memoir. Like it felt like it was a really good story and a great experience I'd had over the course of 5 years. And I knew from reading largely reading wrestling memoirs that the stories that have an arc, that like a 5 year, 6 year, 7 year arc tend to be more interesting than just somebody looking back at a 30 or 40 year career and like just trying to cherry pick moments because you never really feel like you're in the moment there. Like when someone's had a storied career and they're just trying to look back and capture everything. I think I think there's like minimal emotional investment in those books, and I knew that I felt like I had a pretty good story to tell where lessons are learned, and with a nice balance of the surreal and the touching and the foolish, and I felt like if I didn't get it down this year, that I probably never would.
Mike Young, I'm glad you joined us. Finally, your turn to ask a question.
Oh, hey, how are you?
Unbelievable.
Mike, they were threatening to fire you, man. I'm not trying to tell, but
I get that every single day.
Yeah,
but...
that is true. I do threaten to fire him every day, and with just cause, as we've seen here. But go ahead, it's your turn, I guess.
Yeah, well, you've run the gamut as an author in terms of the types of books that you've written, but how is the writing process different for this book compared to your earlier autobiographical work, and how did the enjoyment you felt while writing this book compare to those previous ones also?
Hey, good question. It was a great experience, and in the introduction, I write about the fact that it was really like, I don't mean to sound all artsy, but like it's like the purest writing experience because the first one was amazing, but I wrote it largely because the guy that was supposed to be writing it, the ghostwriter, was doing a mediocre job, and I just felt like I could do it better, or else I'd be stuck for eternity with a mediocre book, and nobody wants that. And so it worked out great, and opened up a lot of doors for me. But from that point on, the second book was like a way to take advantage of the the success of the, and even the Hardcore Diaries and Countdown to Lockdown they were like 6 week periods where I was writing them as the events were unfolding, so that like story wise they were a roll of the dice. I didn't know if they're going to end up being good stories or not. And in this case, it's just something I really wanted to do. I didn't think there was an audience. At a certain point, I was just really intent on self-publishing like 100 copies, for family and friends. And then a couple of key people, Stephanie McMahon being one of them, convinced me that it might deserve a wider audience.
Oh, well, I'm going to follow up there real quick. The foreword for your latest book was written by Stephanie McMahon. What went into the decision to ask her to do it, and how did she react when asked?
Oh man, I wrote something about that, and you guys will kind of get to sneak the preview of that. She had just decimated me verbally in a backstage interview. It was one of the cruelest verbal tirades, even by wrestling standards. It was the one, I think, at the end of February that ended with the man who used to be able to stand up to anyone and anything can now barely stand at all. And when it was done, I said, I'd like to talk to you in private if I could. And I mean, she knows I'm professional now. I'm not going to yell at her over a promo. But I said, and it was hard because this is a tough thing to ask. I said, I was wondering if you would consider writing the introduction of my book. and it just caught her completely flat-footed. Like she she was kind of speechless for a second. She goes, "I wasn't expecting that," and then she told me she'd be honored to, because when we were GM and commissioner, like I was working on this book, and she would ask me about it. One day she came to catering, and she started asking me a couple questions. I thought she came to talk to me about like a promo we were doing. And after about 40 minutes, I was like, "Do you want to talk about the promo?" And she was like, "No, I just think this is really interesting." And I was like, "You think this is a story people would enjoy?" And so she really helped me believe in my own project. I mean, I hope I don't kill her on-air persona, but I really respect her, not only as a performer and a person, but also as a writer, So every writer has like a few key people they depend on to like give them feedback. And in this case, she was the key person. He was my sounding board on a weekly basis. And the main reason why I decided to publish it instead of self-publishing for family and friends.
Brandon Galvin?
Well, without spoiling much, because we're very excited for the book to be released, is there anything that you can share with us that you're most excited for fans to read or learn?
Oh man, and I'm not excited for fans to learn the great lengths I was going to keep the magic alive for my own children. But it means a lot to me. I mean, part of the reason I was running late is I was out having this letter I received from Santa where he asked me to be one of his ambassadors. I was having it laminated so that when I go to my book signings, I have this official document from Santa, so I'm not confusing the children who might be in the audience. Like, that's important to me. So people, I think they know that I'm into it. They will either be really excited or a little bit disturbed to see like just how much it means to me. Like that like doing a really good appearance in front of a couple of children can mean as much to me as having a great match on a pay-per-view.
Mike, your next question?
It's often been said that WWE's motto is putting smiles on people's faces, and the same can be said for playing the role of Santa Claus. So how do you feel being a WWE superstar helped prepare you for being Santa and spreading that Christmas cheer all year round?
Did you say playing the role?
Being. I meant being.
Get him! Get him!
I'm not playing, pal!
That's the guy we tried to fire. See, this is what I'm talking about.
It reminds me
of...
hey, like, there were times when I was playing the role of the characters I had, and other times when I really felt like I was living that role, and those were like the best appearances where you get caught up in that character to the point where you feel like you are that character. And it's the same thing. I really feel like the experiences I had as a, and I don't want to give away. Stephanie's got this great line in her introduction, in her forward, and it was something I actually tried to write, like getting to the main point of what I'd learned from doing this, and I didn't feel comfortable. It was like it was almost too heavy, and I didn't know how to phrase it without sounding all ideological or crazy. And it happened that she remembered it almost word for word from a conversation I'd had, where I basically said that all these experiences I had, from being in the ring, portraying characters, visiting children and service members, like really put me in a unique position so that I could kind of step in and really inhabit this role, which I believe is closer to who I really am. I just have to be nicer and kinder and wiser than I am in real life. Whereas, when you're Cactus Jack and Mankind, you have to be crazier and braver and far more aggressive. Like, I wasn't like the classic alpha male in the dressing room, but I had to go in there with guys that were 6 inches taller, 80 pounds heavier, who were those alpha males. And I had to find a way to hold my own, because the business is what it is. But if you can't stand your ground, you get devoured in there. And that was really difficult for me. It took me a long time to get the grasp of that, whereas this character, the Santa character, is a little bit closer to home, I think.
BG, next question.
Well, throughout your career in WWE, you helped launch the careers of superstars such as Stone Cold, The Rock, Triple H, Randy Orton, and Edge. And the segment where you turned into Cactus Jack before the 2000 Royal Rumble is my favorite of all time. Does this hold a special value to you when you think back on your career? Or do you ever think that you were slighted or overlooked at all during your time in WWE?
No, I did not think I was slighted or overlooked. There's a really great quote from JR's book, Slobberknocker. I read an excerpt from it today where he talked about how little faith Mr. McMahon had in me when I arrived, and he was basically agreeing to the hire just so JR could find out what it's like to have his heart broken by a character you believe in who won't turn out to be anything. Well, what was the question? Sorry, I just had to get that off my mind.
Well, when you were the
follow it up or something.
Well, you were the catalyst.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So yeah, for a guy who wasn't, as it turned out, brought in to be a big deal, who was in a sense brought in to fail. I not only thought I, exceeded everyone's expectations, but I feel like I got plenty of credit. I really do. And when I see a segment like that one in 2000, I remember just watching it the first time in about 10 years, several months ago. Or actually, I think I watched it when a guy named Matt Ricardo, a great illusionist out of the UK, he had me on his podcast, and he played that as his favorite all-time career memory. And man, it's hard not to get goosebumps. And you just look at the expressions on Triple H and Stephanie's face, and it just helped make that character, work. I mean, if he just shrugged his shoulders and said, the same guy with a different shirt on, it would have been dead. But, I mean, he sold it and she sold it like they were seeing a ghost from the past. And that, to me, is when the business is at its best, when everybody's, helping out each other and everyone comes out better in the end.
Well, you're a longtime proponent of women's wrestling. What were your thoughts on the Mae Young Classic, and who are some of the superstars from that tournament you think can really make it as superstars on the main roster?
Oh, man, you're going to put me on the spot here and think that I can memorize names. I'm going to have to just point out, that person from...
just give me gimmicks. The MMA lady, the pirate lady.
A young lady from Scotland, I thought, did a very good job. I think she lost in her first match, but she did a lot of things. Everything she did was done with a purpose. I've been a big fan of Mia Yim's, going back to when she was Jade, and I thought that she had that great match with the young lady in NXT that does kind of like the, not does the Kentucky gimmick, but she's from Kentucky. I thought they had a heck of a match. Shayna Baszler showing a lot of potential, and the young lady who won it, she's got that special it factor. So I'll be honest, I didn't see every matchup, just like I'm trying to catch up on 205 Live as well. That's one of the benefits of having complete knee replacement, is you get plenty of downtime.
Mike Chiari?
Looking back on your recent run as Raw General Manager, did you get everything that you wanted out of it? And is there anything that you wish you could go back and maybe do differently, or potentially an angle that you would have liked to have been a part of during that time?
Oh, man, it's easy to look back and go, I could have, would have, should have. The only thing I'd say, I wish it had lasted longer. But it just got to the point where traveling was just agonizing. And going in, the goal is really to help, create interest in some of the characters and to be fired in spectacular fashion. And so, I look back at, there was a pre-tape written for me where, Cesaro and Sheamus were going to come into the office, and I was going to kind of dismiss them as if they were garbage. And I said, I really want to approach this differently. And I had come up to Cesaro and Kevin Owens and told them, look, I have to have a reason why you guys were taken, so deep in the draft. Like, even if it never comes up, if I don't have a reason in my mind, it's mind-boggling why it wouldn't be, why the draft would work out the way it was. So for Kevin Owens, he was the biggest jerk in the locker room, and Shane had told me in conversation that he wouldn't draft him if he was the last person on the roster, which isn't true, but but in my mind it was. And for Cesaro, his shoulder made him a question mark. And so instead of dismissing those guys like they were garbage, I kind of challenged both of them to be as good as I knew they could be. And when it was done, I remember Scott Armstrong said, "Did you write that?" And I said, "Yeah, well, I didn't write it, but I did it, from the heart." And he goes, "That's really good, man. That's really good." And both those guys got a sense that they had somebody there who cared about their characters. And, one of my finest moments as GM was I was with my son who's on the creative team, and I was with Michael Hayes and Arn Anderson, and we were watching that seventh match, the finale of the best of seven. And, man, people didn't want any part of that when we announced it. And yet I believe we were in Indianapolis for Clash of Champions, and they went to a time limit draw, which is normally going to, just disgust everybody. And the place was chanting for more time. They tore down the house. I had this brand new sports coat. I finally realized that everyone had caught on that I only owned one sports coat, and I was just accessorizing a black sports coat with like a different shirt each week. And I see Sheamus coming, and he's just pouring sweat. And I'm thinking to myself, oh, no, he's going to hug me. He's going to hug me. He's going to hug me. And I just took one for the team, and he wrapped his arms around me and he embraced me. And he just, he and Cesaro both felt like the faith I had shown in them meant a lot to them, and they never let me forget it. They're always very quick to point that out, that even though that GM position is largely an on-air authority figure, that you do get to go to bat for people, and you do get to pick your fights when you believe in them enough. And so those were two of the guys that I really fought for, and two of the fights that I picked, and I'm probably proudest of the stuff that I did with them, as well as the episode where I put the sock on Triple H. That was a great Raw for me.
Brandon Gavin, final question.
Your comedic work in WWE is widely regarded as some of the best, if not the best, in WWE history. Was there a friendly competition in the locker room for who could deliver the best lines or segments, or was it just the unusual or usual unspoken competition to always top the other performers?
Speaking of the GM roles, when I was commissioner in 2000, it was like my own candy store. I could do whatever I wanted with it, and the role in 2016 came with a lot more restrictions. But I also felt like the role in 2016 wasn't the time for lighthearted comedy. It wasn't the time. It bothered me when people would get themselves over at the expense of wrestlers. Not naming names, but it always bothered me, and I didn't want to be one of those guys. So while the timing was right for it in 2000 and for the character, in 99 with the Rock and Sock connection, it wasn't time for it in 2016. But no, there was a friendly competition between me and Al Snow, and fortunately for me, I had a lot more time on air than Al did. And the one time he tried to get his digs in on me, Mr. McMahon told him to stop. He goes, Mick, I don't mind when you do it because it's funny, but Al just completely destroyed that segment. So I kind of had carte blanche to do whatever I wanted. But no, there was no competition. It was just a way of lightening up a show, which had been kind of in a dark period. Like the shows kind of they kind of come in waves, and when I came in, it was coming off a period that was very heel heavy and dark, and I felt like it was my job to lighten it up a little bit. And I look back fondly at guys like Edge and Christian as being like my like proteges when it came to some of the sillier stuff, and even Kurt Angle was a great comedic foil. Briscoe and Patterson, I had no shortage of great people to work with, and that role just lent itself at that time to a comedic touch.
Well, a huge thank you to our guest tonight, Mick Foley. Check out his new book, Saint Mick, My Journey from Hardcore Legend to Santa's Jolly Elf. Available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, everywhere books are sold, October 17th. Tell the fans where else they can support you.
Oh, they can just, I try to keep it real. So the website is realmickfoley.com. Twitter is @realmickfoley. Facebook is @realmickfoley. Facebook.com/realmickfoley. And if they want to find out about book tours, frequently asked questions, things of that nature, they can just catch me on there. So thank you for this first interview. It was very enjoyable. Hope I did not ruin Stephanie's reputation by saying nice things about her, but they're very, very much deserved.
Another huge thank you to Mick Foley. Good luck moving forward, sir.
All right. Have a nice day.